A humid darkness clung to Havana that night, thick, restless, and strangely alive. The kind of night where every alley whispered a secret, every shuttered window felt like it was watching, and every distant sound carried the weight of unfinished battles. Storm clouds gathered low along the horizon, making the city feel trapped beneath a pressing sky. Lanterns flickered beneath gusts of moist Caribbean wind, struggling to hold their light against the encroaching gloom. The revolution had triumphed only months earlier, yet the air trembled with unease. Victory, it seemed, did not silence ghosts. Batista loyalists still lingered like venomous serpents in the grass. Foreign agents prowled the outskirts of power, and even among the young victors, ideological storms were forming. Every night after sunset, Havana transformed into a battlefield of rumors, shadows, and the kind of paranoia born from too many years of fighting in the mountains. And in the middle of this teetering calm stood Ernesto Che Guevara. He walked through the nearly deserted corridor of the Provisional Government building, his boots echoing sharply on the polished floor. He wore fatigue trousers and a loose shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms burned by sun and scarred by war. His combat boots, forever dusty, squeaked faintly with each step. He carried a stack of folders under one arm, industrial plans, import charts, letters from factories struggling to reorganize after the revolution. The work was endless, and he felt it in his bones tonight. But he couldn't rest. Not yet. Not when the revolution still shook on uneven legs. Che pushed open the balcony door at the end of the hallway. Warm wind brushed against his face, carrying the scent of the sea mixed with tobacco smoke drifting from the streets below. He leaned his elbows on the railing, staring out at the city. Lights shimmered on the water like scattered stars. Somewhere distant, a muffled gunshot punctured the night, a reminder that old enemies had not gone silent. He inhaled deeply and closed his eyes. The humid air filled his lungs, igniting a slight wheeze from his asthma. He waited, steadying himself until the breath came easier. Behind him, footsteps approached. "You're still here," came Raul Castro's voice, weary but steady. Che didn't turn. "Sleep is a luxury reserved for people who aren't trying to rebuild a country," he muttered. Raul walked to his side, arms folded tightly across his chest. His face, normally calm, carried traces of sharp frustration tonight. "Fidel wants us at the palace within the hour. He says there's been movement." Che opened his eyes. Movement. Some of Batista's old intelligence officers met tonight in Los Sitios. Our men tried to tail them, but lost track near Calle Barcelona. "Lost track," Che repeated softly. "Convenient." Raul looked away. "Don't start. Our people are stretched thin. We're still cleaning out the remnants of his regime." Che didn't respond, but the tension between them thickened. In the mountains, their disagreements had been philosophical, ideological. Now they were administrative, political, heavy with the consequences of governing rather than fighting. Che found this battlefield more suffocating than the jungles of Sierra Maestra. "Fidel says we must tighten internal security," Raul added. Che gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Of course he does. Every night brings a new phantom. Spies, traitors, infiltrators. Havana is full of ghosts." "Ghosts that can still kill," Raul cautioned. Che finally turned to face him. "Do you trust everyone around you?" Raul hesitated, just for a moment, but Che saw it. The uncertainty, the doubt. "That's what I thought," Che said. A heavy silence passed between them, filled only by the sound of the wind scraping against the balcony railing. Then Raul stepped back. "Come. We shouldn't be alone out here. Not tonight." Che gathered the files and headed inside, mentally preparing for another long meeting. But as they walked down the corridor, a messenger approached, nervous, eyes darting, shirt soaked with sweat despite the breeze. "Comandante Guevara," he stammered. "An urgent communique." Che took the small folded paper. The handwriting was shaky. He read it once, slowly. "A target has been chosen. The operation is imminent. The night will not end cleanly. No signature. No indication of its origin." Che folded the message calmly, but his heartbeat quickened. Raoul read his expression. What is it? Another shadow, Che replied. They continued walking, but unease lingered over them like a storm cloud refusing to break. Across Havana, in a dimly lit bar tucked between crumbling colonial buildings, whispers swirled like smoke. Men in cheap suits huddled in corners, murmuring about rumors, about revenge, about unfinished business, about a figure whose name sent shivers through the trembling remnants of the old regime. El Comandante is moving too freely, one said under his breath. Someone will correct that, another replied. At a corner table, a man in a fedora adjusted the brim low over his eyes. He scribbled notes in a small notebook. Time, location, security rotation. His fingers trembled slightly, but he forced them steady. He wasn't a soldier, nor a loyalist, just a paid observer. And tonight, there was much to observe. Your drink, the bartender said, setting down a glass. The man didn't lift his head. Just keep it full. The bartender studied him for an extra second. Something felt wrong. Something in the man's posture, his nervous energy, the way he avoided all eye contact. The bartender's gut twisted, but he moved on, pretending not to notice. Outside, a stray cat slipped along the curb, pausing beneath a flickering street lamp. Its ears twitched. It sensed tension, danger, something prowling through the night with fatal intent. Back in the government building, Che stopped before entering the main office. He turned to Raoul. Did Fidel say who delivered the earlier intelligence? Raoul shook his head. He only said the source was useful, but unverified. Che's jaw tightened. Unverified intelligence is a trap waiting to spring. Especially now. You think this is bait? I think, Che said slowly, that someone is already making moves while we argue over bureaucratic files. He pushed open the door. Inside, Fidel stood at a large table cluttered with documents, maps, and coded messages. His eyes, sharp, dark, always scanning, lifted immediately. Che, Fidel said, voice booming with controlled fury. We have a problem. We usually do, Che replied. Not like this. Fidel held up a small brown envelope. This came from an intercepted courier in Marianao. He tossed it to Che. Che opened the envelope. Inside was a single line typed on thin stationery. He will not survive the night. A chill crept down his spine. He looked up. Who was it meant for? That, Fidel said grimly, is what we need to discover. Che felt the weight of the message in his hand. Light as paper yet crushing as stone. Someone was planning something tonight. Something precise. Something personal. Is it meant for you? Raoul asked. Or for you, Che countered. Or for any of us, Fidel said. The room felt smaller, suffocating, filled with invisible eyes watching them. Che folded the message silently. His mind raced, not with fear, but with calculations, patterns, possibilities. He had survived ambushes, betrayal, hunger, sickness. But this felt different. This felt like a knife being sharpened not in the jungle, but in the very heart of Havana. Strengthen security, Fidel ordered. Nobody moves alone. Che nodded, but said nothing. Because he already knew something Fidel didn't. A threat delivered so discreetly, so quietly, so confidently, wasn't a warning. It was a promise. And as Che stepped back onto the balcony one last time before leaving the building, the city below seemed to pulse with danger. The humid air tightened around him, as if the night itself were inhaling, waiting. Somewhere out there, someone had already chosen target. And perhaps, Che thought with a cold, unsettling certainty, perhaps that target was him. The Ministry of Industries loomed like a darkened fortress at the edge of Vedado, its once elegant colonial balconies now weighed down by stacks of crates, new security posts, and guards too young to hide their nerves. The revolution had transformed every government building into a battleground of paperwork, ambition, and whispered fears. And tonight, it felt more suffocating than ever. Che arrived after midnight, stepping out of the jeep with a folder under his arm and exhaustion pressed deep into the lines under his eyes. The moon cast a pale silver sheen over the ministry's facade, making its cracked plaster and bullet-pock columns look like the scars of a living creature. Comandante, a guard saluted, but the gesture trembled. Che noticed immediately. Everything all right, compañero? The young man swallowed hard. See, just long shifts. Che didn't push further. Fear was thick in the air. He could almost taste it, metallic and stale like rust on the tongue. It clung to the ministry gates, the windows, the flickering lamps. Something had shifted in the city tonight. Something invisible but undeniable. He stepped inside. The lobby smelled of ink, sweat, and damp paper. Stacks of documents towered on desks. Typewriters clicked in a frantic rhythm, as if racing against time itself. Stray cigarette smoke curled up into the dim light, giving the entire hall a hazy, unreal quality. Che walked past clerks hunched over ledgers, past tired revolutionaries who tried to look busy the moment his boots echoed against the floor. His reputation, discipline, effort, sacrifice, followed him like a second shadow. Comandante Guevara. The voice came from behind one of the pillars, small, shaky. Che turned. A man stepped into view, glasses slightly crooked, shirt damp with sweat. His hands clutched a small notebook, so tightly the knuckles had turned white. Comandante, I need to speak with you. Privately. Che studied him. The man was unfamiliar, but fear radiated from him so strongly that Che felt it in his own chest. Walk with me, Che said. They moved down a narrow hallway lined with dusty portraits toward a small storage room. Che pushed the door open and gestured inside. The man hesitated for a heartbeat, then entered. Che followed and closed the door behind them. Now the only light came from a single overhead bulb that flickered like a dying heartbeat. Who are you? Che asked. My name is Eduardo. I work in data filing. I've been here since February. And what do you need to tell me? Eduardo wiped sweat from his brow with a trembling hand. There are strangers here at night. Men who don't belong to any department. I don't know their names, but I've seen them twice this week. They arrive after hours. They check rooms they shouldn't, storage areas, access archives. And yesterday, I heard one of them asking when he usually leaves. Che's jaw tightened. Who is he? Eduardo swallowed. You, Comandante. For a moment, Che felt the room tilt, not from shock, but from confirmation. The shadows were moving exactly where he feared they would. He stepped closer. Describe them. They. Eduardo's breath caught. Tall. Clean-shaven. Not Cuban accents. One had a scar on the jaw, the other wore a pin on his lapel, but I couldn't see what it was. Foreign operatives? Batista's men? Or, worse, someone working inside the revolution? Eduardo's voice dropped further. I reported it to my supervisor. He told me to stay out of it if I wanted to stay alive. The bulb flickered again, dimming the room. Fear tightened the space between them. Che placed a reassuring hand on Eduardo's shoulder. You did the right thing. Tell no one else. For now, you're safe. Eduardo nodded quickly, too quickly, like a man trying not to unravel. Che stepped out into the corridor again, mind racing. He expected infiltration. Of course he did. But inside his ministry, the one he pushed so hard to shape into a skeleton of the future economy, if enemies were bold enough to walk his halls at night, then the strike was closer than anyone had admitted. He headed toward the records room, boots tapping rhythmically against the cracked tile floor. He pushed the door open and stopped. A small crowd of guards surrounded something by the main gate, flashlights flickering wildly across it. Their faces were pale and drawn. What's going on? Che demanded. The guards parted. At the center of the circle lay a metal briefcase, dark, dented, and utterly out of place. One guard, a middle-aged man with a scar on his chin, stepped forward. We found this under the gate, Comandante. It wasn't here 10 minutes ago. Che crouched beside the briefcase, studying its edges, hinges, the faint, oily fingerprints on its surface. He didn't touch it. Did anyone see who left it? The guards exchanged shameful glances. No, Comandante, the scarred guard said. The lights went out for several seconds. When they came back, this was here. Che looked up sharply. The lights went out. Another guard nodded. See. All of them. Just a blink. But a blink was enough. Enough to plant something. Enough to send a message. Or enough to detonate a bomb. Clear the area. Che ordered. Everyone. Guards rushed back, gripping their rifles. A young one whispered a prayer under his breath. Che stayed still, eyes fixed on the briefcase. After a long moment, he exhaled slowly. Bring the bomb unit. Yes, Commandante. While they waited, silence settled over the ministry courtyard. Even the night insects seemed to hush themselves in anticipation. 20 minutes later, the bomb squad arrived. 3 revolutionaries wearing mismatched protective gear. Sweat dripped down their temples as they examined the case. Che stood close by, arms crossed, face unreadable. After tense minutes, one technician looked up. It's empty. A ripple of confusion ran through the guards. Che's eyes narrowed. Empty. Yes, Commandante. Nothing inside. Not even paper. A wave of dread washed through him. An empty briefcase wasn't a failed bomb. It was a message. A taunt. A promise. He turned to the nearest guard. Check all security posts. Any record of unusual movement tonight. The guard sprinted off. Che remained still, hands tightening into fists. His chest felt tight, not from asthma, but from something darker. Someone had walked right up to his ministry gates, dropped an empty briefcase, and vanished into the night. Someone with confidence. Or worse, someone with help from inside. The night grew heavier as Che walked deeper into the ministry. He passed storage rooms, printing offices, small workshops cluttered with prototype machines. The ministry felt foreign tonight, as if strangers' eyes watched from every shadowed corner. A ringing telephone cut through the silence. Che stepped into his office and grabbed the receiver. Guevara. Fidel's voice crackled through the line, sharp, tense. Che, where are you? At the ministry. Good. Stay there. What's happened? Something unpleasant. Fidel's voice dropped. We've intercepted another message. Your name came up. Be careful. Che felt his pulse slow, not quicken, but slow, like his body was focusing on every detail. Do you know the source? No. Too many moving pieces. Too many hands in the dark. Then Fidel said something he almost never said. Be careful, hermano. The line clicked dead. Che stood still, receiver pressed against his ear even after the silence settled. He could almost feel the threads tightening. Batista loyalists? CIA saboteurs? Radical factions within the revolution itself? The silence of the office was broken only by the steady ticking of a clock on the wall. Tick, 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 every second pulling him closer to something unseen. He lowered the phone. Just then, a faint rustling sound came from the hallway. Not footsteps, something softer. A page turning? A match striking? A whisper? Che stepped out into the corridor. Nothing. But the air felt wrong. Heavy. Watching. And then, down the hall, partially hidden in a darkened doorway, someone was scribbling in a notebook, head down, almost too calm for the hour. Not an employee Che recognized. Not a guard. Not anyone who belonged. The stranger looked up. Their eyes met. The stranger froze, but only for a heartbeat. Then he turned and vanished into the stairwell. Che rushed forward, boots pounding the floor. But by the time he reached the stairs, the stranger was gone. Not a trace left behind. Only the faint smell of cigarette smoke. And the deepening certainty that tonight's whisper was not a warning, but the start of a hunt. Rain swept across Havana in thin, needling sheets, turning the cobblestones slick and shining. The city lights blurred into streaks as the storm deepened, washing the streets with a coldness unusual for the island. Che stepped out from the ministry's rear entrance, coat flung over his shoulders, hood pulled low. He didn't mind the rain, he welcomed it. Rain made the city honest. It washed away the noise, the pretending, the false smiles. But tonight, even the downpour felt tainted, like the sky itself knew something was unraveling. He walked along the narrow sidewalk, boots splashing through shallow puddles, replaying the last hour over and over again. The empty briefcase. Eduardo's terrified whisper. The stranger with the notebook. Every detail slotted into his mind like pieces of a map, but the pattern refused to reveal itself. As he turned toward the eastern passage of the ministry compound, a figure stepped out from behind a column. shielded from the rain by the overhang. Che. The voice was familiar. Che stopped. Captain Morales stepped fully into the dim yellow light of the corridor lamp. His uniform clung to his body, soaked through, but he didn't seem to notice. His face was half hidden in shadow, but Che recognized the sharp cheekbones, the deep-set eyes, the slight twitch on the left side of his jaw. A habit he'd had since the mountains. "Morales," Che said calmly. "You're out late." Morales gave a tight smile. "The revolution doesn't sleep. Neither do its enemies." Morales's eyes flickered just for a second, but Che saw it. Uncertainty, fear, something tightly wound beneath the surface. "It's been a long time since we spoke," Morales said, voice forced into casualness. "Since everything changed." Che stepped closer. "Since we left the mountains, you mean?" Morales nodded, eyes drifting slightly. "Things were simpler then." "Simpler," Che echoed. "But not easier." For a moment, silence hung between them, heavy and stretching, filled with ghosts of gunfire in the Sierra Maestra, nights spent under dripping leaves, and the taste of victory mixed with grief. Morales had been loyal, fierce, a man with fire in his blood and conviction in his voice. Che remembered him dragging a wounded compañero through enemy fire, refusing to leave anyone behind. Che remembered trusting him with operations that required total faith. But the man standing before him now was different. Hollow, agitated, detached, like someone carrying a secret too heavy to bury, but too dangerous to reveal. "Why are you here?" Che finally asked. Morales shifted, glancing toward the street. "I was passing by." Che cocked his head. "Passing by?" "The ministry at midnight during a storm." Morales wet his lips, struggling to keep his face still. "I needed air." Che didn't move, didn't blink. He studied the man carefully, every nervous twitch, every darting look. Morales avoided eye contact now, something he never did before. In the mountains, he stared enemies in the eye before pulling the trigger. "What happened to you, viejo?" Che asked, voice low. Morales stiffened. "Nothing happened." "Lies don't suit you." A flash of anger crossed Morales's face, quick but unmistakable. He turned slightly, letting the shadows swallow most of his features. "I'm tired, Che. Tired of the late nights, tired of the new structure, tired of being told what the revolution is supposed to be." "So you're tired," Che said quietly. "We all are. But exhaustion doesn't make you look at me like you're expecting a bullet." Morales's breathing hitched. The rain intensified, pounding the roof, drumming like distant artillery. Che continued, voice softer but sharper. "If you're in trouble, tell me. If someone's pressuring you, tell me. You don't have to do this alone." Morales's mouth opened, then closed. His jaw trembled. For a heartbeat, Che thought the man might break, spill everything right there, in the storm's embrace. But Morales steadied himself, spine straightening like a soldier returning to discipline. "I have no trouble," he said quietly. "Just responsibilities." "Responsibilities to who?" Morales didn't answer. Che stepped even closer, lowering his voice so only the rain could overhear them. "I've seen you meeting men who don't belong to our ranks. Whispering in alleyways. Watching me from afar. Don't deny it." Morales's eyes widened, not in surprise, but in fear. Real fear. "How long have you been following me?" Che demanded. Morales's silence was an answer sharper than words. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the courtyard in stark white light for a fraction of a second. And in that brief flash, Che saw Morales's expression clearly. Guilt, panic, desperation, and resignation. Morales stepped back. "I shouldn't have come tonight." "Then why did you?" Che asked. "To see," Morales hesitated, voice cracking. "To see if you were still alive." Che froze. "What does that mean?" Morales swallowed hard. "Things are moving. People are talking. Plans are being made." "Plans for what?" Another flash of lightning. Thunder rolled overhead. Morales's eyes filled with misery. "I can't say more." "You will say more." Morales flinched at the edge in Che's tone. Thunder vibrated through the ground like the footsteps of an approaching giant. Finally, Morales whispered, "There are forces at play you can't stop. Not anymore." Che felt the words sink into him like ice. "Which forces?" he pressed. Morales shook his head, trembling as though fighting an internal war. "I shouldn't be seen here. If they find out." "Who?" Morales laughed, bitter and broken. "Does it matter? Batista loyalists, the Americans, radicals, inside our own ranks. Take your pick. Everyone has a reason to carve their place into what we built." Che stepped closer, close enough to feel Morales's shaky breath. "Did you betray me?" Morales stiffened as though struck. His throat bobbed. He didn't answer. Lightning flashed again. For one heartbreaking second, Morales's face crumpled with grief. "I never wanted this," he whispered. Che's blood chilled. "Wanted what?" Morales's voice cracked. "They came to me. They said if I didn't cooperate, if I didn't give them something, my mother, my sister." His voice broke entirely. He ran a hand over his face, wiping away rain or tears. Che's expression softened with reluctant empathy. "Morales listened to me." But Morales took another step back, as if the space between them was dangerous. "I didn't plan anything," he said desperately. "I didn't pull any trigger. I just opened a door. One door. It was only supposed to be access. They promised no one would get hurt." A hollow laugh escaped him. "I should have known better." Che's heart hammered. "Someone inside the ministry. Someone with access. Who are they?" Che demanded again. Morales looked at him with a shattered expression. "Che, you don't understand. I can't tell you. Can't or won't." Morales hesitated. "Both." A gust of wind slammed through the corridor, blowing papers and debris around them. The storm roared louder, drowning the city in water and sound. Morales backed away further, voice small. "Whatever you're planning tonight, stop. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't trust." His voice cut off abruptly. His eyes darted toward the street, behind Che. Che turned instinctively, but saw nothing. When he turned back, Morales was running. "Morales!" Che shouted, but his voice was swallowed by thunder. The captain disappeared into the rain-soaked maze of Havana streets, boots splashing, coat whipping behind him like a torn flag. Che didn't chase. He just stood there in the storm, breathing hard, heart pounding. Because Morales hadn't denied guilt. He had confessed to something worse. Complicity. But the most chilling part wasn't that Morales had helped open a door for Che's enemies. It was the part Morales didn't say, the part he couldn't say. Someone else, someone above him, someone more dangerous, was giving the orders. And they were coming. Che stood very still, rain soaking his hair and dripping down his face like cold sweat. Morales had said one thing that kept echoing. "I came to see if you were still alive." Che looked toward the shadows of the ministry, the empty courtyards, the flickering lamps. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting. And the hunt had only just begun. The storm had eased by the time Che reached his quarters, though the streets still glistened like black mirrors, reflecting trembling lamp posts and the eerie stillness that followed a violent night. Havana, in those quiet hours before dawn, looked almost peaceful, almost. But Che knew peace was just the thin crust forming over boiling water. Inside the city's veins, turmoil pulsed like a fever. He closed the door behind him and leaned against it, exhaling slowly. Water dripped from his hair onto the wooden floorboards, forming small, uneven circles beneath him. His clothes clung to him, cold and heavy. Morales's trembling confession echoed inside his head like a curse he couldn't shake. "I just opened a door." What door? To whom? And what had already passed through it? Che moved to his desk, lighting the small lamp that bathed the room in a warm glow. The contrast to the dark city outside made the space feel strangely vulnerable, exposed. He shrugged off his soaked coat and hung it over the chair. His chest tightened again, not from the asthma entirely, but from something sharper, deeper. He reached for the letters on his desk. One from Aleda, one from his mother, a scribbled drawing from one of his children. He traced a finger over the childish lines, a sun, uneven houses, stick figures with smiling faces. Innocent, oblivious joy. His breath hitched for a moment, something constricting in his throat. He whispered to the empty room, "You deserve a better world than this." The silence stretched back. Chase sank into the chair, elbows on the table, hands clasped. He wanted to write Aleda a reply. Anything, even a mundane sentence about health or work, but the words did not come. His mind kept returning to Morales's haunted face, his cracked voice, the rain dripping from his jaw as he spoke of danger he wouldn't name. Che rubbed his temples. Fatigue seeped into his bones like dampness into old wood. It had been months since he'd slept more than 3 hours at a time. The revolution demanded too much from everyone, but from him, it demanded pieces of his soul he wasn't sure he had left. The thought barely formed before someone knocked on his door, sharp, rapid. Che straightened immediately. Adelante. The door opened and Camillo entered. Camillo Cienfuegos. Friend. Brother of the revolution. One of the few Che trusted without hesitation. His curly hair was wet, his uniform rumpled, and his expression drawn tight with worry. "You look like hell," Camillo said in greeting, though his voice lacked its usual humor. Che allowed a faint smirk. "You should see the other guy." Camillo didn't return the smile. He shut the door and stepped closer, boots silent despite his hurried movements. "I heard about the briefcase at the ministry," he said. "And there are rumors you had a strange visitor outside." "Rumors travel faster than bullets," Che said. Camillo's jaw clenched. "Are you all right?" Che hesitated, then nodded. "For now." Camillo sat on the edge of the table. The lamp cast soft shadows across his face, emphasizing the worry lines etched into his forehead. "Che," he began slowly, "the men are restless. None of this feels random. Invisible enemies, coded messages, strange faces in the ministry at night. This sounds like the beginning of something coordinated." Che nodded. "Morales is involved." Camillo's eyes widened. "What?" Che leaned back, recounting the conversation with Morales, his guilt, his fear, his cryptic warnings. Camillo listened, expression hardening with every detail. When Che finished, the room felt smaller, heavier. "Morales." Camillo muttered. "He was loyal, solid. He bled with us." "Loyal men bleed first when pressured," Che said softly. "The question is, who applied the pressure?" Camillo stood abruptly and paced. "We need to tell Fidel." "I will. But Morales is a symptom, not the disease." Camillo paused. "Do you think they're planning to act tonight?" Che didn't answer right away. He walked to the window and parted the curtains slightly. The street was quiet. Too quiet. Lanterns swayed gently in the moist breeze. A stray dog trotted across the pavement and disappeared into an alley. The moon peeked through thin clouds, silvering the rooftops. But beneath that calm, something stirred. Something unseen. Something waiting. Che let the curtain fall. "Yes," he said. "Something will happen tonight." Camillo stepped next to him, lowering his voice. "Then we double your security." Che shook his head. "No, that will only escalate things. Whoever is behind this, they're watching. If I suddenly surround myself with guards, they'll know I know. And they'll change their plan." Camillo stared at him, incredulous. "You want to walk into danger blind?" "I want them to reveal themselves," Che replied. Camillo's fist tightened. "You're not a martyr. You're needed. The revolution needs you alive." Che turned to him, exhaustion and defiance mixing in his eyes. "The revolution needs truth even more." Camillo stepped closer, jaw firm. "Then, at least let me stay with you tonight." Che hesitated. "Only a second. But enough." "Fine." Camillo nodded once. But just as they were settling into a tense silence, a soft sound came from outside the window. Both men froze. Che reached slowly for the pistol on the desk. Camillo's eyes darted to the window. A faint scraping. A soft thump. Then stillness. Che signaled for silence. Camillo moved toward the window with the stealth of a jungle fighter, flattening himself against the wall. Che stood a few feet behind him, weapon raised. Camillo jerked the curtain aside. Nothing. Just the empty street, glistening under a wavering lamp. Che exhaled. probably a branch or a stray cat. Camillo didn't move. No. I heard metal. Che walked onto the small balcony, scanning the edge. As he crouched near the railing, his heart stopped for a second. Underneath, the Jeep parked across the street. A metallic shape glinted. Small. Cylindrical. Out of place. Camillo followed his gaze, eyebrows shooting up. Is that? Yes, Che said quietly, pulse racing. A device. They rushed downstairs, moving with urgency but not panic. The moment they stepped outside, the humid air pressed against them like a hot hand. They approached the Jeep cautiously. Che knelt down. His breath shortened. A small explosive had been strapped beneath the vehicle. Crude. Improvised. But deadly enough. Camillo swore under his breath. They planned to hit you on the road. Che inspected the device. It's not fully wired. Someone planted it in a hurry. Meaning they were here, Camillo hissed. Recently. Che stood, scanning the rooftops above, the dark windows, the narrow alleys branching nearby. Someone has been watching my movements, Che said. Studying the patterns. Tonight was supposed to be the night. Camillo turned in a slow circle. But we interrupted them. Or scared them off. Or someone warned them, Che countered. Camillo stared. Morales. Che didn't reply. He didn't need to. The pieces were forming. Slowly, painfully. Morales had opened a door. Someone else was walking through it. Camillo looked at him, voice low. What now? Che took a long breath, gaze fixed on the shadows around them. Now, he said, voice steady despite the storm in his chest. We prepare for the second attempt. Camillo's jaw tightened. There will be one? Yes, Che said. Assassins rarely fail twice. He turned toward the ministry, eyes cold, sharp, ready. Something had moved tonight. Something hidden, calculating. The streets felt like hallways of a maze designed to trap him. The air felt electric with the expectation of violence. And Che knew. The next hit would not be sloppy. It would be precise. It would be close. It would come from someone who already knew his patterns, his habits, his vulnerabilities. And as dawn crept closer, softening the edges of the Havana night, Che felt the truth settle like a weight on his spine. Someone wasn't trying to frighten him. They were trying to finish him. And the night was not over yet. Dawn broke slowly over Havana, casting a hazy gold over the city's cracked streets and battered walls. The light was gentle, warm, even beautiful. But to Che, it felt intrusive, like an unwelcome guest stepping into a room still thick with secrets. The bomb beneath the Jeep had changed everything. It wasn't a warning. It wasn't intimidation. It was intent. Cold, calculated intent. Che walked through the ministry hallway with Camillo at his side. The morning air smelled faintly of damp stone and burnt coffee, but beneath that familiar scent lay something metallic. Tension, fear, suspicion. Every guard they passed straightened immediately. Every clerk paused, eyes wide, whispering behind hands. News of the attempted attack had already slipped through the building like smoke. Inside Che's office, the atmosphere was crisp with silence. He shut the door behind them. Before we do anything else, I need to know what Morales knows, Che said. Camillo nodded, though his expression was stormy. He shouldn't be alone right now. Che agreed. Morales was fragile, guilty, frightened, shaken. A man who had cracked once could crack again, in any direction. They moved to the makeshift holding room where Morales had been kept overnight, guarded but not restrained. Two guards stepped aside as Che entered. Morales sat on a wooden bench, hands trembling in his lap. His eyes flickered up when Che entered, and for a heartbeat, hope flashed across his face. Then it vanished. "Commandante," he whispered, his voice rough. Che closed the door. Camillo leaned against the far wall, arms crossed, watching with a steady but intense gaze. Che pulled a chair close and sat directly in front of Morales. "Tell me everything." Morales swallowed, his throat tight. "I told you. I didn't know what I was opening the door to." "Then guess," Che said quietly. "Guess with all the honesty you have left." Morales flinched at the words. Tears pooled at the corners of his eyes, and he wiped them clumsily with the back of his shaking hand. There were messages, Morales said. Small notes slipped under my door, always unsigned. They knew things about my family, things men like me fear for. Camillo stiffened. Extortion. Morales nodded miserably. They said if I didn't open access to the planning room, they would correct the balance. I thought maybe they only wanted information. I swear, Comandante, I didn't know they wanted your life. His voice broke. Che studied him carefully. Morales was not lying. His guilt was too raw, too human. Che placed a hand on Morales' shoulder. Who contacted you? Did you ever see a face? Morales shook his head. Only a symbol, a seal, on one of the notes. What kind of seal? Morales reached into his pocket, hands trembling, and pulled out a folded scrap of paper. I kept this one. I don't know why. Maybe because it scared me more than the rest. Che unfolded it. At the center was a simple mark. A black triangle with a slash through it. Che's breath stilled. Camillo leaned over his shoulder. Is that? Yes, Che whispered. It was a symbol that had surfaced months ago, rumored to be used by a shadow network of Batista loyalists who refused to accept defeat. A group known only through whispers. Los Silenciados. The Silenced Ones. A name based on the irony that they preferred shadows, secrets, and silence over open confrontation. They were ghosts in the city, never confirmed, never identified. Rumors said they had ties to ex-military officers, foreign agents, possibly even people embedded inside the revolutionary government. Che folded the paper, mind racing. Morales continued, his voice small. I thought they were bluffing, just trying to protect their own power. But after last night, I know they meant everything. Che nodded. You must stay under watch. Not as a prisoner, he glanced at Camillo, but for your own safety. Morales sagged with relief. But Che's mind was burning. Los Silenciados had resources, inside knowledge, and clearly a network. The bomb beneath the Jeep hadn't been placed by amateurs. Someone had known Che's patterns well enough to predict which vehicle he would use. Someone with proximity, access. Someone inside these walls. Che stood abruptly. Camillo, we need to review the security logs from last night. Camillo nodded. I'll bring them. Minutes later, they gathered around the central planning table, blueprints and maps scattered across it like discarded evidence. A young officer brought the logbook, thick, handwritten entries detailing comings and goings. Che flipped through page after page, his eyes scanning with mechanical precision. Time, door, clearance, name. Most entries were orderly, consistent. Until he stopped suddenly. An entry at 2217. A clearance code labeled T-47. Camillo frowned. We don't have a T-47. Exactly, Che murmured. A fake code. Someone entered the ministry under forged clearance. Che tracked the entry to the next column. Personnel. Escalera Oeste, the west stairwell. That's near your office, Camillo said quietly. Che nodded, feeling cold spread through him. And near the planning room Morales accessed. He flipped ahead. Another entry. 2304. Same fake clearance code, T-47. Exiting through the north gate. Camillo slammed the table. So someone infiltrated the building, planted the device, and walked out like they belonged here. Che exhaled slowly. Which means we're not hunting outsiders. We're hunting a traitor, Camillo finished. The room fell into a heavy silence. Che straightened. Close the ministry. No one enters, no one leaves, without identification. Quietly. If we make noise, we push the enemy into hiding. Camillo nodded and left to carry out the order. Che remained in the office, staring at the logbook. T-47. A ghost clearance. A ghost infiltrator. A ghost enemy. His fingers drummed softly on the desk. A small detail nagged at him, something too quiet, too subtle. The pattern of guards last night had been unusual. The man stationed near the west corridor had been one of the newer recruits. Quiet. Almost invisible. Che rose and walked toward the barracks. The morning sun was now fully up, casting long shadows through the courtyard. Birds perched on rooftops, chirping like the city hadn't nearly lost him hours earlier. He found the recruit in question, Corporal Rojas, sitting on his bunk polishing his boots. He looked up, startled, his hands freezing mid-motion. "Corporal," Che said, voice calm but sharp. "A moment." Rojas stood quickly. "Si, Comandante." Che studied him. Young. Nervous. Too nervous. "You were assigned to the West Corridor last night," Che said. "Yes, sir." "Did you see anyone unusual?" Rojas hesitated. "Too long." Che took a step closer. "Speak." Rojas swallowed. I heard footsteps after midnight. Someone moving quickly. When I called out, they didn't stop. But I didn't pursue. I thought maybe it was one of the senior officers." "Did you recognize the silhouette?" Che asked. Rojas's eyes darted away. "No, sir." A lie. Che felt the shift in the air, subtle but unmistakable. Rojas's hands were trembling slightly, his breathing uneven, his gaze flickering toward the door, measuring escape. Che stepped back, giving him space, his voice soft but cutting. "Corporal, the truth could save your life." The young man's jaw tightened. Then he bolted. Che moved instantly. Camillo, who had returned moments earlier and stood at the entrance, blocked the exit with a single swift movement. Rojas skidded to a stop, panic shredding his composure. "Don't," Camillo warned. Rojas's shoulders slumped. Che approached slowly. "Who gave you the fake clearance?" Rojas's lips quivered. "If I tell you, they'll kill me." Che's expression hardened. "If you don't, you're already dead." Rojas squeezed his eyes shut, breath shaking. Finally, a whisper. "A man in the logistics division. He said if I let him pass, my family would receive protection. He had documents." "A symbol." Che's heart clenched. "The triangle?" he asked. Rojas nodded weakly. "Name," Che demanded. Rojas opened his mouth. A gunshot cracked through the air like lightning. Rojas jerked violently and collapsed to the floor, blood spreading beneath him. Che spun around. On the rooftop across the courtyard, a figure slipped out of sight, fast, practiced. A sniper. Camillo cursed and sprinted outside, but Che grabbed his arm. "No, he's already gone." They stared down at Rojas, whose breath was fading, eyes wide with terror and apology. Che knelt beside him. "Who?" he whispered urgently. Rojas's lips moved faintly. Che leaned closer. A single word escaped, broken, choked, fragile. "Inside." His eyes went still. Camillo stood frozen, fists clenched. Che slowly rose, chest tightening, fury simmering beneath his ribs. The sniper had silenced Rojas before he could reveal the traitor, which meant the enemy was close, very close, inside the ministry, inside their ranks, inside the revolution. And Che knew one thing with terrifying clarity. The true attack hadn't begun yet. It was coming, and the traitor was watching. The walls of the ministry felt colder that afternoon, colder than stone should ever feel under the Cuban sun. Even with daylight pouring through open windows, the corridors seemed wrapped in a chilled aura, as though the building itself recoiled from the betrayal that had seeped into its veins. Che walked slowly down the main hallway, boots echoing off the marble. His face was unreadable, carved from patience and exhausted fury. The sniper's bullet still rang in his ears. Rojas's final breath haunted him like a ghost whispering from behind a curtain. "Inside." A word capable of unraveling everything. Camillo matched his pace silently, his usual easy stride replaced with a stiff tension. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning corners, glancing behind them, evaluating shadows like they were suspects on trial. "Whoever we're hunting knew exactly when to pull the trigger," Camillo muttered. Che nodded. They were watching Rojas. They knew he cracked. And they had a clean shot into the courtyard. That means they planned this long before the Jeep bomb failed. Che paused at the intersection of two hallways. Clerks passed swiftly, their gazes nervous, their movements rushed. Some tried to stand straighter when they saw him, but their eyes betrayed trembling discipline. Fear traveled fast. Che turned to Camillo. "We need to control the narrative. If panic spreads, everyone becomes a suspect." "Everyone is a suspect," Camillo said grimly. Che didn't disagree. They reached the intelligence room, a cramped office stacked with maps, coded reports, incident logs, and boxes of unsorted files. Inside, a young officer named Lopez stiffened when they entered. "Commandantes," he said, throat tightening. "I wasn't told you were coming." Che motioned for him to sit. "We need the internal rosters for the last 48 hours. All personnel who had access to the West Corridor and the Logistics Division." Lopez swallowed but obeyed, rummaging through a drawer stuffed with clearance documents. As he worked, Che watched him closely. The young man's movements were steady, too steady for someone who nearly flinched when they entered. Not guilt, Che assessed, but fear. "Here," Lopez said, placing several pages on the table. Camillo spread them out. Names, roles, signatures. Some familiar, some not. The list was long enough to blot out hope. Che rubbed a hand across his face. "This will take time." "Time we don't have," Camillo replied softly. Che leaned over the table, scanning each line with methodical intensity. Something would stand out. Something small, overlooked, insignificant on paper, but explosive in context. He reached the 10th name and paused. Carlos Benitez, Logistics Division. Che stared at the name. A faint ringing rose in his ears. Camillo saw the change in his expression. "What is it?" Che tapped the page. "I remember him. Quiet, efficient. The type who blends in. He was in the records room last month when I reviewed the transport schedules. He shouldn't have been there." Camillo frowned. "You think he forged the clearance? Or facilitated it?" Che said. "He has access to routing logs, supply manifests, guard rotations. Logistics is the bloodstream of information." Lopez shifted uneasily. "Benitez hasn't been in today. He called in sick." Che's jaw tightened. Sick. The word tasted false. He straightened abruptly. "Where does he live?" Lopez hurried to fetch the address card. Camillo leaned toward him. "If he's part of Los Silenciados, he won't be sick. He'll be preparing the next move." Che folded the address card and placed it in his pocket. "Then we go to him." The building's courtyard was buzzing with quiet activity as they stepped outside. Guards moved with disciplined urgency, securing entrances, checking identification, questioning anyone who lingered too long. The air felt charged, brittle, ready to snap. As Che and Camillo approached their jeep, a lieutenant hurried over. "Commandantes, should I assemble a unit to accompany you?" Che shook his head. "No. The more men we take, the more noise we create." Camillo added, "And our ghost will run the moment he hears boots." The lieutenant hesitated. "At least allow a driver." "I'll drive," Camillo said firmly. Che climbed in beside him. The engine roared to life. They pulled out of the courtyard, turning onto the main road. Havana streets bustled with their usual chaos. Vendors shouting, children chasing each other, old men playing dominoes in the shade. To any outsider, it looked like a normal day in a city rebuilding itself. But Che's gaze flicked between alleys, rooftops, balconies. Nothing felt normal. Camillo sped through the streets, jaw tight. If Benitez is involved, there could be a whole network behind him. Che nodded. "And if that's true, then last night wasn't their only attempt." Camillo gripped the wheel harder. "What do you think the next one will be?" Che looked out the window, watching faces blur past. Something closer. Something personal. They've already tried distance attacks. They'll want proximity next. A knife. A hidden pistol. A trusted face. The thought sent a chill down his spine. Benitez's address led them to a narrow street near the outskirts of the city. A row of aging apartment buildings lined the block, their walls patched with mismatched concrete. Laundry hung from balconies like limp flags. Camillo parked a block away. "We go on foot." Che nodded. They approached the building quietly, blending into the flow of pedestrians. A woman sweeping her doorstep eyed them suspiciously, but said nothing. A dog barked from behind a gate. The apartment number, 2C, was on the second floor. Camillo took point. When they reached the door, Camillo pressed an ear against it. Silence. Che gestured. Camillo tried the handle. Unlocked. They exchanged glances, never a good sign. Camillo pushed the door open slowly, pistol drawn. Che followed. The apartment was small, dimly lit by the afternoon sun filtering through half-closed blinds. A fan whirred lazily in the corner, stirring hot air without cooling it. Clothes were neatly folded on a chair. A plate with half-eaten rice sat on the table, still warm. But no Benitez. Che moved cautiously through the room, eyes scanning for anything unusual. And then he saw it, a cardboard box sitting beneath the window. He approached it slowly and opened the flap. Inside was a stack of documents, maps of the ministry, marked with red circles. Security schedules. Diagrams of the West Corridor. Photos of Che, taken from various distances. Notes scribbled in tight handwriting. And, at the bottom, the symbol. A black triangle with a slash. Che's hand tightened into a fist. Camillo let out a low, tense breath. This is our proof. Che lifted one of the papers. It was a draft of a message. A plan. Tonight. Midnight. Final correction. Che's pulse quickened. Tonight, he said. They're planning something for tonight. Camillo's eyes narrowed. But what? Another bomb? Sniper. Che shook his head slowly. This wording, it doesn't sound like a long-distance attack. Camillo's gaze hardened. Inside the ministry? Che nodded. During the night shift, Camillo muttered. Minimal guards. Reduced oversight. Che placed the papers back into the box. We need to return. Now. As they turned to leave, a soft creak sounded from the hallway. Camillo reacted instantly, flattening against the wall and motioning for Che to stay low. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Then, a figure passed the doorway. Camillo lunged, grabbing the man and slamming him to the wall. The man yelped in shock. It was the landlord. What are you doing? He cried. Che stepped forward. When was the last time you saw Benitez? The landlord stammered. 2 nights ago. He left before dawn. He paid his rent early. He said he'd be traveling. Running. Disappearing before the strike. Che exchanged a grim look with Camillo. He's not coming back, Che said. No, Camillo replied. He's already in position. Back in the jeep, racing toward the ministry, Che felt everything falling into alignment. Morales opening a door. Fake clearance. The infiltrator moving through the West Corridor. The bomb under the jeep. The sniper silencing Rojas. All threads converged. Not to scare Che. Not to pressure him. Not to destabilize operations. But to isolate him. To get him alone. Midnight. Reduced personnel. A single weak point in security. And then, an inside strike. Che's fingers tightened on the edge of the seat. They want me inside the ministry tonight, he said. Camillo's jaw worked. Then they'll get you. Che looked at him sharply. Camillo continued, but on our terms. Che nodded slowly. The trap had been set for him. Now, he would set one of his own. Night returned to Havana like a closing fist, tight, heavy, full of a taste of rain and unfinished violence. The city lights flickered uncertainly, as though they sensed the tension crawling beneath the cobblestone streets. Buildings hunched in silence, alleys narrowed with shadows, and even the restless dogs quieted their nightly howls. A storm wasn't coming. Something worse was. Inside the Ministry of Industry, the corridors lay half-lit, the soft hum of flickering bulbs shifting along the walls like nervous whispers. Night shift workers spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting at sudden sounds. The memory of the sniper shot, the bomb, the infiltration, all of it lingered in the stale air like a metallic smell no one could wash off. Che arrived shortly before midnight. He stepped through the main entrance, wearing the same calm expression he displayed before battle, composed, focused, and deceptively serene. He had changed into a plain uniform without rank insignias. No medals. No visible authority. Just a man walking into his own shadow. Camillo walked beside him, jaw clenched. His hand hovered near the pistol on his belt. Everything is in place, he whispered. Che nodded. Earlier, they'd ordered silent protocol changes. Non-essential halls sealed. Only 3 entry points open. A double rotation of trusted guards. Surveillance positions filled discreetly. But none of this was visible. On purpose. Tonight, Che was the bait. They reached Che's office. Camillo entered first, checking corners, windows, sealing vents. Satisfied, he stepped back so Che could take his place behind the desk. The room felt different tonight, tighter, colder, as though the walls themselves were aware of the danger. Che set down a folder on the table, opened it, and pretended to read. His heart thumped steadily, not from fear, but the suffocating pressure of anticipation. "Stay outside," Che whispered. Camillo hesitated. "Che." "Outside," he repeated, his tone firm but not unkind. "If the assassin sees both of us, he won't come." Camillo swallowed hard, then nodded. "If anything moves, call out." Che gave a small nod. Camillo stepped outside and quietly shut the door. Che was alone. The ticking of the wall clock filled the silence like a countdown. The lamp on the desk cast a warm, steady glow. Shadows curled along the edges of the room like dark, waiting hands. Che pretended to read, though he wasn't seeing the words. His senses stretched outward, listening for the faintest disturbance. A floorboard, a breath, a rattle of a vent. Minutes crawled by. Then, a soft click. Che froze. It was subtle, too subtle for anyone casually passing by. A mechanical shift inside the room. Che didn't look up, didn't move. Another sound. A whisper of air from above. Che flicked his eyes upward. The ceiling vent. The screws had been loosened, not enough to fall, but enough to allow a small device to slip through. Something glinted behind the grill. Che forced himself not to reach for his weapon. Patience. The assassin was waiting for Che to look, waiting for him to show awareness. Che lowered his gaze again. The vent above shifted ever so slightly. A string was being lowered, thin, nearly invisible. At the end of it, a small metal tube. A gas dispersal device. Silent, efficient, deadly. Che's stomach tightened. They planned to kill him without noise, without confrontation, without letting him see a face. He rose suddenly from his chair, tipping it backward. As it clattered to the floor, Che rolled aside, kicking the desk upward. The string jerked. The device dropped. Before it hit the ground, Che fired. One precise shot. Crack. The bullet struck the device mid-air. A puff of thick white gas erupted, swirling violently. Che held his breath, threw himself toward the door, and burst into the hallway. Camillo spun instantly. What happened? Che grabbed his arm. Vent. Gas. Someone's above us. Camillo's eyes flared. He shouted, "To the roof." Guards sprinted down the hall. Che and Camillo raced up the staircase, boots pounding. Every step echoed like a war drum. As they reached the fourth floor, a guard shouted from above, "Movement on the roof." "Someone's running." Che ran faster. They burst onto the rooftop, the humid night hitting them like a wave. The city sprawled below, glittering, oblivious. The rooftop itself was littered with water tanks, pipes, and storage units. Perfect places to hide. A figure sprinted toward the far edge. "Stop." Camillo roared. The figure didn't stop. Che fired a warning shot. The figure ducked behind a water tank. "Fan out." Camillo ordered. 3 guards spread across the rooftop. Che moved quietly along the left flank, pistol ready, eyes scanning every shadow. The assassin tried to slip between 2 storage crates. Che saw the movement. He sprinted forward. The assassin leaped out, slashing with a knife. Che twisted aside, narrowly avoiding the blade. The metal flashed inches from his throat. Che countered with a quick elbow strike, hitting the attacker's jaw. The figure stumbled, but recovered swiftly, too swiftly. This wasn't a common hired gun. This was a trained operative. Their eyes locked. Che saw nothing human in those eyes, just cold, silent purpose. The assassin lunged again. Che dodged, grabbed the attacker's wrist, and forced the knife downward. They grappled in a heated struggle, boots skidding, breaths loud, sweat mixing with grit. The assassin was strong, precise, efficient. Che felt his muscles burn, his lungs strained. He was losing breath, losing strength. The assassin pushed him toward the edge of the building. Che's heel touched the ledge. Camillo shouted from across the rooftop, "Che!" Che's eyes sharpened. He dropped his weight suddenly, pulling the assassin forward. The assassin stumbled, just enough for Che to twist free. He kicked the attacker's knee, forcing them down. The knife clattered away. Before Che could pin him, the assassin rolled fluidly and dashed toward the opposite edge. "Stop!" Che yelled. The assassin didn't hesitate. He leaped. For a split second, Che thought he'd jump to his death. But then he saw it, a rope tied to a rusted pipe, dangling to the alley below. The assassin slid down, fast and controlled. Camillo reached the edge. "We can catch him." Che grabbed his arm sharply. "No, it's a trap." Camillo froze. And within seconds, a civilian car roared to life in the alley, headlights flashing. The assassin jumped in. It sped away. Guards shouted, firing into the night. But the car vanished into the labyrinth of Havana's streets. Camillo slammed his fist against the ledge. "Damn it." Che exhaled heavily, chest heaving, the adrenaline pounding in his ears. He stared into the darkness, where the assassin had disappeared. "They planned every angle," he said. "Even the escape." Camillo approached him, still breathing hard. "But we saw him. We fought him. We know he's real. That's more than we had." Che shook his head slowly. "We need more than a ghost. We need name." Camillo's expression tightened. "And how do we get that?" Che looked down at the street again, jaw firming. "They left clues. They always do. Even the best operatives make mistakes. We find the patterns. We follow the symbols. We track their networks." He turned toward the doorway, exhaustion giving way to sharp determination. "And we catch the traitor who let him in." Camillo stepped beside him. "Then tonight wasn't their victory." Che shook his head. "No," he said. "Tonight was the beginning." The city breathed quietly in the early hours after the rooftop confrontation. Rain had returned, this time a light drizzle, dripping steadily from the roofs, pooling in the narrow alleys, and washing away the faint traces of footprints left by the fleeing assassin. Havana appeared calm, innocent almost. Yet Che and Camillo knew better. The storm of human malice was far from over. Che walked through the courtyard of the ministry, boots silent on wet stone. His mind replayed every move on the rooftop, the precision of the attacker, the rope escape, the speed of the car. Every detail pointed to one conclusion. Someone within the ministry had orchestrated it all. The chain of events had started with Morales opening the door, but the mastermind was still hidden, still manipulating the pieces from behind the shadows. Camillo followed closely, eyes scanning every window and alley. "They're clever," he muttered, voice low. "Too clever to be amateurs." "They're patient," Che said, tone tight. "And patient killers are the most dangerous." Inside, the ministry felt oppressive. Guards patrolled with an unnatural alertness, whispering to each other as they passed. Clerks and office workers, who moments ago had been quietly returning to their duties, now moved with hesitant steps, glancing over their shoulders as though they feared a phantom waiting for them in the hallway. Che stopped at the staircase, leaning against the cold wall. "We need to narrow our circle of suspects," he said. "Too many possibilities will scatter our focus." Camillo crossed his arms, his brow furrowed. "Start with Benitez contacts. He didn't act alone." Che nodded. "Morales knows more than he admits. We need to debrief him again. Quietly. No one else involved." They returned to Morales's temporary quarters. He was seated on the small bench, staring at the floor, hands clasped tightly. When Che entered, Morales's eyes flicked upward, weary, frightened. But behind the fear was a glimmer of relief. Che was alive, and that seemed to matter more than anything else tonight. "Comandante," Morales whispered, voice trembling. Che gestured for him to remain seated. "We need details. Every contact you remember, every stranger, every message, every whisper." Morales's fingers fidgeted with the hem of his shirt. I gave them access, yes, but only the logistics info. I didn't know who would use it." "Who?" Che asked, calm but insistent. "Name anyone." Every detail matters. Morales swallowed hard. I don't know his name. He used Benitez. He coordinated through coded messages and the symbol, the black triangle. But he also contacted another man, someone higher up. I didn't see him, but I know he exists. He signs the notes personally sometimes. Che's eyes narrowed. How often? Every few days, Morales admitted. He ensures all orders follow precisely. He communicates through intermediaries. I was only a small part. Che let the words sink in. Someone higher, someone untouchable, someone inside the revolutionary structure itself. This wasn't just Batista loyalists acting on old grudges. This was someone who had intimate knowledge of the ministry's inner workings and of Che's personal schedule. Camillo stepped forward. That explains the jeep, the sniper, and the gas device. Every attack was coordinated, timed perfectly. They knew your patterns. Che nodded. Exactly. And they're patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. A long silence followed, the only sound the distant patter of rain against the roof. Finally, Morales spoke again, voice barely audible. I didn't want anyone to die. I just opened doors. I thought maybe they wanted information, not blood. Che studied him, seeing the raw weight of guilt etched in every line of his face. Sometimes opening a door is enough to let evil walk in, he said quietly. Morales lowered his gaze. I know, Commandante. I know. Che exhaled slowly and stood. Camillo, we track every step from last night. Everyone who had access to that corridor. Every movement. I want patterns, schedules, anything unusual. Camillo nodded. Already on it. We've also reviewed the security footage. Someone's moving inside the ministry, even now watching. Che's lips pressed into a thin line. Then tonight we will catch them. Whoever it is. No mistakes. No mercy. By evening, the ministry had transformed into a fortress of subtle vigilance. Lights were dimmed in non-essential corridors, the floors polished and silent. Guards were stationed strategically, instructed to maintain appearances yet remain alert to anomalies. Every corner became a potential hiding spot, every shadow a possible threat. Che moved like a shadow himself, observing, noting every detail. He didn't carry a weapon openly. He wanted the intruder to believe he was alone, vulnerable. That was part of the plan. They needed the enemy to show himself. Camillo positioned himself in a secondary hallway, hidden from view, but close enough to intercept any movement. They had set silent alarms, metal detectors disguised as routine inspections, strategically placed reflective surfaces to see around corners, even improvised tripwires on seldom-used stairwells. Every precaution they could devise had been implemented. Hours passed. The ministry seemed calm. Too calm. Then a sound, a whisper almost imperceptible, of movement near the logistics wing. Che froze. Camillo stiffened. A shadow detached itself from a wall, a figure gliding with unnatural precision. A mask concealed his face, dark clothes hugging his frame. Che's pulse tightened. So predictable. He stepped out from his concealment. The intruder froze, calculating. The black triangle emblem glinted faintly on a note tucked into his belt. Che's voice cut through the corridor, calm but edged with steel. We know who you are. Step forward. The figure hesitated. Camillo appeared from the side, weapon raised, forcing him toward the wall. There's no escape. The intruder's stance shifted, revealing a knife strapped under his jacket. But his movements betrayed someone desperate, cornered, yet still trained. Che advanced slowly, keeping his eyes locked on the man. Why? He asked. Who sent you? Who gave you this? The figure flinched at the intensity of Che's gaze. The mask slipped slightly, revealing a young man's face, one of the ministry's clerks. Please, he whispered. I didn't mean. Che's jaw tightened. You entered my home, attempted to kill me, and killed a man. That is not a mistake. I was ordered, the young man said quickly, voice shaking. I only followed instructions. I didn't know it would escalate. Che studied him carefully. And who gave the instructions? The young man's eyes darted around nervously. Benitez and someone above him. Someone in the upper offices. Che's mind raced. The network was bigger than expected. Benitez had been a piece. Morales another. And now this clerk, another link in a growing chain of betrayal. Camillo tightened his grip on the intruder. The hierarchy above him, are they still here? The young man nodded frantically. Yes, they're all here, waiting. They've planned tonight for weeks. Che exhaled slowly. Then we are not just stopping one man. We are uncovering the circle. Camillo's eyes narrowed. And if they resist, Che's voice was soft but lethal. Then we finish it. All of it. Tonight. The intruder trembled visibly. He had expected intimidation, perhaps capture. But the calm precision in Che's posture, the cold clarity of his gaze, was more terrifying than any weapon. He realized the game he was in was already lost, trapped in a web he could not see fully, but whose threads tightened inexorably around him. Che motioned for the guards. Secure him. No rough handling. I need answers. Camillo moved to assist, checking the corridor for other movement. Silence hung heavy, oppressive. Che stared at the young man, voice low. Start talking. From the beginning. Every message. Every movement. Every person involved. If you hide anything. The intruder swallowed. I will tell everything. I swear. Che's lips pressed into a thin line. Good. Begin. No longer were they reacting. They were hunting. And in the shadows, the real architects of the plot, higher, smarter, more dangerous, were realizing their careful construction had been cracked. Che's calm, precise anger had become the storm. And this storm was only beginning to rise. The ministry seemed impossibly still as Che sat across from the captured clerk. Outside, rain fell steadily, the streets gleaming under dim lamplight. Each droplet sounded amplified against the roof, like a metronome counting down to something inevitable. The city, for all its daily chaos, seemed to hold its breath tonight. Che's gaze was fixed, unwavering. Camillo stood near the door, hand on his holster, eyes scanning for movement. The captured clerk, shaking and pale, avoided Che's eyes entirely. Sweat slicked his temples despite the coolness of the office. His hands trembled, and he tugged repeatedly at the sleeve of his uniform, as though the fabric itself could protect him. Start from the beginning, Che said softly, but with the weight of authority that left no room for evasion. Every message, every person, every instruction you received, nothing omitted. The young man swallowed hard, then nodded, trembling. It had started months ago. Small things at first. Files missing. Minor instructions. Nothing that seemed dangerous. But then the messages began. Notes under doors, symbols on papers. The triangle, Che said, nodding. Yes. Keep going. The symbol, the clerk stammered. They used it to confirm orders. Benitez coordinated. He was the point man, but he wasn't the mastermind. Orders came from above. From someone with access to the highest offices, someone trusted, someone we all believed loyal. Che's jaw tightened. Every word the clerk spoke was a piece of the web. Every hesitated pause hinted at hidden corners they had yet to see. Names, Che pressed. The clerk's eyes widened. I don't know the real names. Only code names. El Tigre. La Sombra. El Maestro. They communicate through intermediaries. I never saw them personally. Camillo, leaning against the doorway, muttered under his breath. God damn it, they're ghosts. Che's gaze didn't waver. And the plan for tonight? His voice was calm, but the words were steel. Was it only to kill me? No, the clerk admitted. It was bigger. They wanted control, fear, to destabilize leadership. If you had died tonight, it wouldn't have ended with one death. The plan was to cripple the ministry from within, divide us, make us suspicious of each other, and then they would strike further. Che absorbed this. The enemy wasn't merely motivated by revenge or power. It was strategy, calculated, patient, and cold. They sought to undermine not only him, but the revolution itself. How many are involved? Che asked quietly. The clerk swallowed. I don't know the exact number. several from logistics, a few from intelligence, some from higher administration. The network is tight, compartmentalized. Most of us only knew a little. I only know what I saw and what I was told. Che's chest tightened. A single realization took shape, cold and sharp. The threat wasn't just external. It was everywhere inside, hidden in plain sight. Every movement, every face, every routine could hide a silent enemy. Che leaned forward. And Morales? The clerk flinched. He opened the door as instructed. He didn't know everything. I swear, he never intended to. To betray, Che said softly. I know. He straightened, voice sharp. Your loyalty was forced. Your fear evident. But fear does not absolve action. You were part of it. And yet, you can still choose the right path. The clerk trembled violently. I will. I want to help. Che nodded. Good. Start by giving me everything. Files, schedules, names, symbols, times, methods. Anything that can identify the next move. Hours passed. The clerk spoke in a trembling, urgent rhythm. Every note, every symbol, every meeting he could recall. Che and Camillo recorded it meticulously. Slowly, patterns began to emerge. Schedules, corridors, times, personnel. One map revealed how the insurgents inside the ministry communicated. Ventilation ducts, hidden alcoves, and abandoned rooms that allowed secret movement. Every corner, once innocuous, now took on a sinister significance. When the clerk mentioned a name repeatedly, Benitez, Che's heart sank slightly. The man was cunning and skilled, but predictable. Patterns left by a mastermind like Benitez were often covered by human error. Even he could be trapped. We know where he will be tonight, Che said quietly to Camillo, who had been listening. In the logistics office, monitoring communications. Camillo's eyes flashed. We go in alone or bring the guards. Che's lips pressed together. No guards. It's too obvious. He'll disappear. We need precision. Quick, clean, silent. Camillo nodded. And Morales? His voice was low, still secure. Che glanced toward Morales, who had been silent, hands folded. Yes. Under watch. But if he shows fear, he might reveal too much. We must act carefully. Night deepened. The ministry's hallways, cleared of non-essential personnel, were quiet. Only the faint hum of ventilation and distant city sounds drifted in. Che moved with deliberate silence, every footfall measured. Camillo shadowed him, just close enough to intercept but not to betray their presence. They reached the logistics wing. Doors were locked, but the clerk had the key. Che placed his hand on the knob, paused, listening. Nothing, just the faint echo of dripping water. He signaled Camillo. They entered. Inside, Benitez was hunched over a desk, maps and notes spread before him. He didn't notice them immediately. He was focused on coordination, typing notes, scribbling symbols, glancing at schedules. The black triangle emblem on one document gleamed faintly under the lamp. Che's pulse quickened. The enemy was finally visible, real. Benitez, Che said, voice calm but with authority. The sound cut through the quiet like a whip. Benitez froze. Slowly, he turned, eyes widening. Commandante. Che didn't allow for hesitation. He stepped forward, pistol drawn. End of the line. Benitez paled, hands raising instinctively. I only followed orders. And orders will not save you, Che replied, voice steady. From tonight, every move you made is exposed. You will tell us everything. Every name, every plan, every hidden network. And if you resist, there is no escape. Benitez's composure broke. Fear overtook his resolve. Okay. I'll tell everything. Camillo moved to block the door, ensuring no one slipped away. The two revolutionaries now had their prey cornered. Che gestured to the clerk. Sit. Record. Every word. Nothing omitted. Benitez nodded frantically. The first admissions came. Safe houses, secret messages, coded signals, hidden allies inside the ministry. Each revelation untangled a strand of the conspiracy, revealing how deeply the enemy had infiltrated. Che listened, heart pounding, but face calm. strategy, patience, precision. These were his weapons now. Every name Benitez revealed was a thread on the web, and Che would follow every thread to its source. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm. Havana, unaware, went about its life. But inside the ministry, the storm was only just beginning. Che's mind raced. Morales' role, the clerk's coerced actions, Benitez's network, all connected. Somewhere above, the true architects waited. The silent ghosts, hidden in plain sight. They had not yet made their move. Che's expression hardened. "Tonight we take the first step," he whispered. "The web will unravel, and we will find the heart of the conspiracy." Camillo glanced at him, jaw tight. "And if they strike back?" Che's gaze was cold, unwavering. "Then they will find we are ready." For the first time that night, a sense of controlled anticipation settled over him. Fear had no place now, only focus, only strategy, only action. The ministry was alive with danger. Shadows hid enemies. Allies trembled under coercion. And in the dark, the real conspirators were still moving, unaware that the trap had already begun to close. Che's pulse was steady. His mind was clear. Every move was calculated. Every thread of betrayal exposed. The night was far from over. But for the first time, Che felt the power shift. The hunters were about to become the hunted. The ministry had transformed into a cage. Every corridor, every shadow, every dimly lit office seemed to hold a secret, a lurking presence waiting to strike. The earlier confessions from Benitez had illuminated part of the network, yet the mastermind remained elusive, like smoke curling through the building's veins. Che knew the real danger was not Benitez, not the coerced clerk, not Morales' nervous panic. It was the architect above them, orchestrating every detail from safety, unseen and untouched. Camillo leaned against the wall outside the logistics office, alert, muscles coiled, eyes scanning each corner. Che stepped forward slowly, pistol in hand, his breath measured. Time had slowed. Each heartbeat sounded thunderous in his ears. He could almost feel the building itself watching, waiting. "The pattern," Che murmured. Benitez confirmed it. "The strike is designed to isolate me, to make me vulnerable. But we turn it around tonight. We bait them." Camillo's jaw tightened. "And if the ghost above decides to strike before we finish this, then we force them to reveal themselves," Che said, his voice low, calm, precise. "Patience, Camillo. Let the web unravel in front of us." Che stepped into the logistics office. Benitez sat, sweating, hands raised. The clerk observed silently, taking notes. The room smelled faintly of wet cement and old paper. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the windows. Che motioned toward the desk. "Place everything here. All codes, maps, documents, schedules." Benitez obeyed with trembling hands, spreading papers across the table. His eyes darted nervously, sensing a deeper danger than before. Che studied them carefully, noting patterns, inconsistencies, hidden messages. A map marked with red circles indicated locations of past movements. A list of names included personnel who had been previously overlooked, potential intermediaries. Every detail added to the picture, a coordinated, patient network, capable of infiltrating, manipulating, and striking without leaving a trace. "Every movement tonight," Che said, voice low, "will be tracked. Every signal monitored. Anyone deviating from these patterns is suspect." Benitez swallowed. "Yes, Commandante. But there are layers above me. People you will not see." Che's eyes narrowed. "I will see them. If they act, I will force their hand." Camillo shifted, glancing toward the hallway. "And the others? Any signs?" Che shook his head slowly. "They're patient. They wait. But patience is their weakness. A controlled trap always reveals the hunter." The three men remained tense, the air thick with fear and anticipation. The ministry itself seemed to hold its breath. Suddenly, a sound. A door creaked softly in the far wing. A faint metallic clink echoed through the corridor. Che's eyes sharpened. "Move," he whispered to Camillo. Quietly, they advanced in near silence, boots muffled on the polished floor. Shadows shifted along the walls. The faintest vibration hinted at movement, someone trying to bypass the guards, bypass Che, bypass detection entirely. The hallway curved. Through the gap, Che glimpsed a figure, masked, moving toward the security room. "Stop," Che said softly. The word was a command, but careful, almost neutral. The figure froze. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the man darted toward a side door. Che fired once, accurate, controlled. The shot struck the lock, forcing the door ajar with a bang. Camillo followed, intercepting the intruder before he could escape. A short, violent struggle ensued. The figure resisted fiercely, revealing the skill of a trained operative. But Che's presence turned the tide. The intruder fell, struggling, pinned against the wall. Che leaned close, voice icy. "Who sent you?" The man's eyes widened. I don't know. Orders. Orders came from above." Che's gaze hardened. "Tell me. Everything." The man hesitated. "Names, codes, locations. If you kill me, they'll know. They'll move." Che shook his head. "We are not here to kill. We are here to uncover the truth. Speak, or the entire network continues unseen." The operative swallowed and began to speak, voice shaking, revealing hidden safe houses, communications, and the chain of command. As each name emerged, Che realized the web was far larger than he had initially imagined. Several senior officials, people he had once trusted implicitly, had facilitated the attacks under the guise of loyalty. Hours passed. Patterns emerged. Finally, a critical piece appeared, a connection between the safe houses, the logistics division, and the secret codes. One name repeatedly surfaced: Colonel Esteban Delgado, a high-ranking officer within the ministry itself. His reputation had been impeccable. No one suspected him. He was a figure trusted by everyone, above suspicion. Che's eyes narrowed. "Delgado," he muttered. "The ghost." Camillo looked at him. "He's the architect. The one above Benitez, the clerk, all of them." Che nodded. "Yes. Delgado orchestrated everything. He is patient, calculating, insulated from suspicion. But every plan leaves a trace. We follow it tonight." Camillo clenched his fists. "Then we strike." Che's lips pressed into a thin line. "We do this cleanly. No mistakes. One wrong move, and the network scatters. Delgado disappears, and we're left with chaos." Che, Camillo, the clerk, and the captured operative moved silently through the ministry. Each step measured. Every corridor scanned for anomalies. Guards remained unaware, routine patrolling providing the perfect cover. The tension was almost unbearable. The slightest sound could signal disaster. They reached the wing where Delgado's office was located. The door, ornate and heavy, was locked, but Che had obtained the keys from Benitez's files, a backup schedule indicating the officer's movements. Che gestured. "Camillo, cover the corridor. Everyone else, follow me quietly." The four moved inside. Delgado's office was dimly lit, papers stacked, lamps casting long shadows. A figure sat at the desk, reviewing documents. Che stepped forward, voice calm but commanding. "Colonel Delgado." The man froze, slowly turning. Eyes wide, jaw tight. Recognition hit him instantly. The web he had spun, intricate and patient, had been traced back to him. Che advanced one step. The attacks, the infiltration, the assassination attempts. "We know everything." Delgado's hands shook slightly. I. You acted against the revolution," Che interrupted. "Against your people. Against the ideals we swore to defend. Yet you believed yourself invisible." Delgado's composure faltered, mask slipping. You can't prove." Che's gaze was merciless. "The evidence, the networks, the files, the confessions, everything leads to you. Every thread ends here." Camillo moved to the door, blocking any escape. Guards quietly sealed exits, ensuring no one could flee unnoticed. Delgado realized the trap had been set months ago, and Che had orchestrated its closure with precision. Delgado leaned back, realization dawning. His network was compromised. Benitez, the clerk, the operative, all captured or neutralized. His plans for tonight, the night meant to isolate and destroy Che, had failed. Che stepped closer, voice calm, resolute. You had patience. You had cunning. But patience has limits. Every move leaves a trace. And cunning can be anticipated. Delgado swallowed, beads of sweat on his brow. I was loyal to the cause. Not to the cause, Che said quietly. To your ambition. And ambition blinded you. The officer's shoulders slumped, the weight of exposure pressing down. The conspiracy that had threatened to undo months of revolutionary progress had been dismantled, piece by piece. The mastermind's mask had fallen. The network shattered. Che's voice softened, yet retained its authority. It ends here. Justice will follow. The revolution remains intact. But remember, true loyalty is not in titles or rank. It is an action in sacrifice and in courage. Delgado said nothing. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft patter of rain outside. Hours later, the ministry was calm once more. Guards moved with regularity, unaware of the storm that had raged in the shadows. Che and Camillo stood on the roof, looking out over Havana. The city slept, or pretended to. Camillo exhaled. It's done. Delgado, Benitez, the others. All contained. Che nodded slowly. Tonight was more than survival. It was exposure. The network has been unraveled, and the ghosts no longer hide in the shadows. Camillo glanced at him. And tomorrow? Che's gaze swept across the city. Tomorrow we rebuild, strengthen, and ensure that no shadow, no matter how patient or cunning, ever threatens the revolution again. The rain continued to fall, washing the streets, reflecting the lights of the city like molten gold. In the quiet aftermath, Che allowed himself a brief moment of relief, a moment to acknowledge the danger survived, the webs untangled, the conspiracies unmasked. And above all, the revolution endured.